so much to talk about, always with Jeffrey Sachs. Immediately, we need a 2-minute minor portable laptop. There it is. Okay. What do you got in here? This is you have all your stuff in here.
Desperate email, you know.
In your notes, and you've got people to talk to and all that. That's fine. We like that you are keeping up to speed on everything. Here's a book, Commonwealth. When's the next book? I'm sure everybody. October 4. What will it be on?
It's called The Price of Civilization, about the U.S. economy and about our political economy. So,
does this suggest that the eclectic Sachs is moving away from development economics, global warming, food economics, and you're going towards the immediate agenda in Washington?
Well, it suggests that I felt, the crisis is so bad here. If we don't get things a little bit better here, the rest of the world is...
It redounds on this interdependent world.
Absolutely. Okay. And we're not solving our problems right now.
Quick food update. Let's get to it. Dreaded first chart. Bring it up here. There it is. You can see it down there, Jeff. Real UN food. This is inflation adjusted. Notice, folks, at the top right, it's less pointy. It's wider than 2008. Compare and contrast now versus the rice inflation of 2008.
Well, we had a big spike there, and then when September hit, all commodities prices fell sharply. But what you see is the longer-term trend, Tom, which is that real food prices are up over the decade. This is a reflection of the rise of primary commodities prices pretty much across the board. It's not only food, it's metals, it's precious metals, it's iron ore, it's tin. It is the rise of China's demand in the world economy fundamentally. We have fast global growth, even though we have stagnation in the rich world. And that fast global growth has pulled up primary commodities prices. For impoverished people, it's devastating. I was in the Horn of Africa last week. Of course, we have one of the worst humanitarian crises in modern memory underway right now, with famine and soaring food prices. But it's also fundamentally a change of the world economy.
I want to show this chart. We don't show this chart enough. Real rice, inflation-adjusted rice, it's a little squishy. For me to do this chart back to the 70s, I had to play with the inflation-adjusted, but it's close. There's the gift, the free lunch, cheap food for a long time. What is the public policy initiative you and Bill Easterly could agree on to help the Horn of Africa, and for that matter, Egypt, short on wheat from Europe, et cetera? What is the common ground on food policy?
I hope it would be a supply-side approach to raise food production in the poorest places in the world. I was there in Nairobi meeting with leaders in the Horn of Africa to talk to them about how their pastoralist economies, that's the livestock economies, could raise productivity significantly with better genetics, veterinary care, market economy system, and so on. For smallholders, whether in India or in Africa or in other very poor parts of the world, their yields could double or triple. Another thing, by the way, that's pushing up this is not only the squeeze on supply from climate change, not only the rise of demand from China, but the fact that the United States, because of lobbying pressure, takes a tremendous amount of our corn or maize out of the food system globally and into the gas tanks. Right. And this is a disaster.
Okay, this is a problem, folks, with Jeff Sachs. We could stay on this for 60 minutes. We're not going to do that today. Here's the FT. Let's move over to globalization, then to domestic politics. Tripped up by globalization, FT, a bit ago. The simple fact is that globalization has not only hit the unskilled hard, but has also proved a bonanza for the global super rich. Are we in a plutocracy? Are we in a Gilded Age?
Of course we are, because the share of income going to the very top is at an all-time high for the United States. Best estimate, top 1% of the households are now taking in 24% of household income. We've not had this perhaps ever in our history, but it closely rivals 1929, just on the eve of the Great Depression.
Are you advocating we distribute down from them to a new middle class, or are there policies where we can bring other people up?
A little bit of both, because the rich have gotten away with tax cuts, tax havens. Corporations are paying historic low rates of corporate tax right now because they are able to push their international profits into tax havens. This is breaking the fiscal policy of our country, but fundamentally this is also a reflection of globalization. People who do not have more than a high school degree in this country, and that's most,
Right.
cannot compete internationally with China right now.
Quickly, and then we'll come back. We have you for the whole hour, which is wonderful. Do you agree with Paul Krugman there are lessons to learn from the 30s, or was that such a closed system, less globalization, that we just can't go back to the theories of Hicks and the solutions or non-solutions of the 30s?
I think Paul has overdone it in emphasizing 1937. That's my own view. He has told us we need bigger spending, bigger stimulus. Don't worry about the deficits. I do worry about the deficits. I didn't like the stimulus to begin with. That doesn't mean I just want to cut in government spending. I want more tax revenues from the top, from the companies. That's the difference. I don't believe that open-ended big deficits are really good for this country, but I do believe that government spending directed towards education, towards infrastructure, towards science is vital.
Consumption, you talk about the poverty of the Horn of Africa. Tell us which nations those are, for those of us geographically at fault here. Who is involved in the Horn?
The one that we hear about most is Somalia, which is where the piracy and the chaos is.
Well?
But Ethiopia, parts of Ethiopia, certainly Eritrea, Djibouti, Kenya, Uganda. And all of this region is racked by drought right now. Drought is leading to famine. Famine is leading to deaths.
Okay. Here's the other side of the story, folks, in this have-not world. Here's American consumption. This is core retail sales. We saw this number today. How much is too much consumption? Through all my study of economics, this has been a real philosophical debate. Is there something wrong with 70% GDP in consumption, or is there a more appropriate Saxian number?
Well, right now we are hardly investing in our country because when you look at the saving, take off the depreciation of capital, especially if you took off the depreciation also of natural capital, the ruining of our environment, you'd find out we're really not saving for the future. That's a problem. So one way to look at this question of consumption is, are we making appropriate provision for the future? Right now, we're not doing so in this country. We have one of the lowest saving rates of all of the high-income world.
This is a chart we show a long time. This is the dearth of national savings. This is all in, folks. This is a really, really, really important chart across all of political economics. This is the savings we do, the big profits at the corporations, the zero savings of small business, and of course the deficit. This is untenable. Am I right, Professor?
It is, and it's a fascinating question of whether there's some kind of deep sociology. This is the baby boom era, and are we just so impatient in our society right now that by the time we get done with our politics and our household behavior and our enterprise behavior, that we're not looking to the future anymore?
Let's rip up the script. You and your colleague at Columbia, Joe Stiglitz, grew up on the different side of the tracks in the Great Lakes. You had I'm going to suggest an advantaged childhood, and Joe grew up pretty tough in Gary, Indiana. Ken Rogoff grew up in a tough community in Rochester, New York, even though his father was a famed surgeon. Everybody's got their own walks of life. What's the appropriate amount of moral savings to have? What's the appropriate prudence that we should have?
You know, everyone has their own view of this, but I think we ought to be responsible in looking to the future and in looking to the people suffering in our own time. And if we lose the compassion for those around us that need help right now, and this society is having a struggle with that, and if we lose a vision of sustaining the planet, sustaining the well-being, sustaining America's prosperity for our children, we're also losing something very big.
Christine Harper joining us, our chief financial correspondent. How bloody is it on Wall Street? My basic take is the third quarter simply didn't happen.
Unbelievable. I mean, yesterday, Richard State at Atlantic Equities cut his estimate for third quarter earnings at Goldman Sachs 97%. From $2,
you ever seen that?
I've never seen that. $2.96 shares to 7 cents a share. The other analysts are coming down to 10 cents a share to 50 cents a share. I mean, it's awful. JP Morgan yesterday, Jess Daly said investment banking fees are likely to be about $1 billion. That's the lowest since, I think, 2006.
Will we see further layoffs of the magnitude percentage basis like we did at Bank of America?
That remains to be seen, but I don't see any good news that's going to cause hiring. You may see businesses being shed, like we're hearing about, some of the stronger regional banks might be able to pick up businesses.
Right.
But the essential thing, and I know you've been talking about this earlier in the show, is really the employment outlook, the economy. As long as that remains bad, I mean, Betsy Graysick at Morgan Stanley put out a report yesterday on Goldman. Her bear case on Goldman, if there's a double dip reception, if there's more unemployment, is that the stock could go to $68.
Let's bring up the chart right here, and then Jeff, I want you to comment on this. You can see their third quarter blues, Goldman Sachs rolling over a long way still from Graysick's $68. Jeff Sachs, is Wall Street the friend or the enemy of the American public?
Well, it was no friend for the last decade. It was reckless. They paid themselves tens of billions of dollars a year of mega bonuses.
People come out of Glenn Hubbard's school and they want to be employed there to make that money, right?
Of course they do. It was a friend of those people, but it wasn't a friend of the U.S. economy, and we're still cleaning up the mess. And now we have a renewed global financial crisis, or a transatlantic crisis. And the news coming out of Europe is bad. The downgrading of two major French banks today is big news. It's big news for the world economy. It shows that the European economy is almost imploding right now unless finally the European leadership gets it right. I've been involved and also watching closely with the Greek crisis over the last few weeks. Europe has badly mishandled it up until now.
What lessons can we learn from your stewardship assisting Russia decades ago?
Well, if you don't act in a financial crisis, and the West did not help Russia, you end up bringing down an economy. If you do act in time, and the West did help Poland, so I watched the plus and the minus, then you can actually help a country not suffer this calamitous downturn.
Christina?
So timing is the key, and timing is everything right now in a financial crisis, and whether Europe's going to get the timing right is an open question.
I mean, obviously, if you see a worst case scenario in Europe, that will bleed over to the U.S. in terms of the economy and therefore to the financial sector. Do you see other serious effects on the financial sector from potentially a banking crisis in Europe? We keep hearing from executives that their exposures are limited. I mean, how believable is that?
They have pushed Greece absolutely to the brink, and getting Greece out of this is complicated to begin with. Several accidents could happen. If Greece goes into open default, I think the contagion would spread to other parts of Europe. The Eurozone could be ripped apart. The U.S., it wouldn't just be the banking exposure, it would be the economic exposure, the trade exposure, and many other linkages. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, and I think everything has to be done to fight that from happening. But right now, the Europeans have just walked right to the precipice. That's why Tim Geithner went over there and said, stop it, at least pull back a moment.
What did you think of Geithner's comment this morning when he was interviewed on CNBC, and he said that he thought the Europeans would never let one of their financial institutions collapse the way Lehman did? Do you think that's true, or do you think there's some that might eventually be allowed?
I think it's good that he's there, good that he said this. It is a right focus right now. It means a lot for the U.S. economy that Europe gets its act together. And Europe can get its act together, but they have to start coordinating. What's happening right now is within Germany, of course, the most important economy in Europe, you have the junior members of the coalition saying, why don't we let Greece default? Let's stop bailing them out. This kind of talk is reckless. And if that continues, now Chancellor Merkel is trying to put down that kind of talk finally. But if that talk actually provokes the crisis itself, we're going to feel the waves, definitely.
Here's the quote from Project Syndicate. Relentless pursuit of GNP to the exclusion of other goals is no path to happiness. Most of America would agree with you on that. Why do you, Lord Laird at LSE, and others study our happiness? Is it just because we're in a miserable time?
We found, and it's not us, Richard Easterlin of Penn found already more than 2 decades ago that U.S. GNP has been rising up until recently for decades, but our reported happiness, our well-being, our sense of well-being didn't rise alongside our income levels. And indeed, when you rank countries by how people report their sense of well-being, the United States is pretty modest in its rankings.
Why?
Well, the countries that are at the top, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, they seem to have a better balance to life. They have guaranteed vacation time. They have not so much extreme wealth, but they have no poverty.
Economic phrase, free ride, where you get on the backs of others. Are they getting a free ride on our defense commitment?
No, I don't think that's really the point. Partly because we waste so much of our military spending. I mean, it's our own fault that we just blew $3 trillion on a war of wrong premises. But I don't think that's really the point. What they have is a much more community and socially based economic system. They take care of each other more. They pay more taxes. They accept the fact they're not going to get super rich, but they know that they're not going to be poor. They're not going to be left out. They don't have the anxiety. They're going to get their health care. They're going to go to university. And it shows up in a high quality of life.
This word anxiety, I see it more and more on the right and on the left. Here's a housing chart. We've shown this before. New home sales, I believe, is population adjusted. 3 deviations. We had a nice boom lit up, and we're right back on the other side. It's just become, a French economist, I can't remember who, in quantitative finance talks about agitation. There's this agitation out there now, isn't there?
There is, because there is no social safety net anymore in this country. If somebody age 50 loses a job, they may never find another job, nothing like the income that they had before. How can they stay in their community? How are they going to provide health care? What if they have a bout of illness? We have taken away that sense of security. We've chosen to withdraw that in the name of individualism, in the name of tax cuts for the rich and everything else. People really are nervous right now, and it's understandable why they are. And then we're seeing more and more of these stories of super rich people writing, why are you complaining about this? They're not nervous. Of course, they have all their needs absolutely guaranteed. But for those median households described in the census report yesterday, whose income went down again for the 3rd straight year as poverty is rising, people are nervous in this country.
There's nervous. What's the policy prescription then? Does it get solved at the ballot box, the voting booth?
If we continue with this, you're completely on your own. If we have Ron Paul saying you're sick, well, maybe you'll die. That's your choice. That kind of approach, I think, is ultimately devastating of trust in our society, of goodwill in our society, of a sense of compassion in our society. Right. And that's, I think, where we've been heading.
Was this successful?
Was what successful?
Coming here for an hour.
Of course, I love coming here.
Okay, good. We'll do 2 hours next time. Jeff Sachs, thank you so much.
Thank you.
5-minute major for bringing his laptop on the desk. Look for an op-ed tomorrow from Jeffrey Sachs.